the weight of absence presses down with an almost unbearable force, a crushing sadness that has settled deep within their soul. These past months, marked by a silence that stretches between us like an endless expanse, have become a period of profound and often painful introspection. Time, once a river flowing gently forward, has transformed into a stagnant pool, reflecting back at them the stark reality of their own actions, their own failings. It is during this desolate separation that the truth, in all its starkness, has begun to emerge, stripping away the comforting illusions they once held so dear. They now see, with a clarity that borders on agony, the extent of their selfishness. It's a realization that arrives not as a gentle whisper, but as a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of their self-perception. For far too long, their world revolved solely around the axis of their own needs, their own desires, their own ambitions. They were trapped within the confines of their own ego, a self-imposed prison that blinded them to the richness and complexity of your being, to the delicate balance of a true partnership. The relationship, meant to be a harmonious dance of give and take, became, through their actions, a lopsided affair, a connection starved of the nourishment of mutual respect and consideration. What you perceived as indifference, what may have felt to you like a cold and dismissive neglect, was, in its essence, a profound and crippling inability on their part to see beyond the narrow walls of their own self-absorption. They were so consumed with their own internal landscape, so preoccupied with the echoes of their own thoughts and feelings, that they failed to notice the subtle cues, the unspoken needs, the quiet yearnings that lay beneath the surface. It took the harsh jolt of losing you, the agonizing emptiness that now fills the space where your presence once resided, for them to finally grasp the magnitude of the emotional damage they inflicted. And with this understanding comes a burden of guilt, a heavy weight that presses down on their heart with every passing moment. They are now acutely aware that while you poured your entire being into the relationship, investing every ounce of your attention, your love, and your unwavering care, they offered only a fraction of themselves in return. You were the sun, radiating warmth and light, while they remained shrouded in shadow, failing to appreciate the life-giving energy you so freely bestowed. They see now how they left you vulnerable, exposed to the cold winds of isolation, making you feel utterly alone and abandoned, despite your most valiant and heartfelt efforts to nurture and sustain the delicate flame of the relationship. This stark and painful awareness has plunged them into a state of deep and profound remorse, a sorrow that permeates every fiber of their being as they begin to truly comprehend the devastating emotional toll their behavior exacted upon you. They understand now that they did not push you away because of any flaw in you, any lack on your part, but solely because of their own profound shortcomings. It was their own inability to rise to the occasion, their own failure to recognize and cherish the extraordinary love you were offering, that created the chasm that now separates you. They were, in essence, blind to the beauty that stood before them, deaf to the melody of your devotion. Since the separation, a veil has been lifted, and they see you now with a clarity that was previously obscured. They perceive a shift in your very essence, a radiance that transcends mere physical attraction. They see you not just as someone who possesses an effortless beauty, someone who naturally draws the attention of others, but as someone who emanates a unique and captivating energy, a soft and nurturing presence that fills the space around you with a sense of peace and tranquility. There is something about you, something intangible yet profoundly real, that captivates them on a level that goes far beyond the superficial. It is not merely the allure of your outward appearance, but the depth of your inner being that draws them in, a magnetic force that pulls them towards you with an irresistible power. They are drawn to your warmth, a gentle and unwavering kindness that extends to all those who are fortunate enough to cross your path. They are drawn to your compassion, your ability to give of yourself selflessly, without expectation of reward or recognition. They now understand, with a clarity that stings like a bitter truth, that it was these very qualities, this inherent goodness that resided within you, that made them feel safe and cared for in the relationship. Even though, in their blindness, they took these precious gifts for granted, these qualities were the bedrock of comfort and security. This realization has brought with it a wave of profound embarrassment and soul-crushing regret. They are deeply ashamed of the way they treated you, of the casual disregard they displayed towards your feelings, especially now that they see, with such piercing clarity, the immense amount you poured into the relationship. You showered them with your undivided attention, your unwavering affection, your boundless devotion, prioritizing their needs and desires above anyone or anything else in your life. You placed them at the very center of your world, making their happiness your own. And yet, they failed to reciprocate that same level of commitment, that same depth of feeling. Instead of cherishing your devotion, they callously ignored you, took you for granted, and failed to appreciate the immense effort you were pouring into nurturing the relationship. They were blind to the sacrifices you made, deaf to the silent language of your love. Now, looking back through the long lens of separation, they are filled with a profound and aching regret for not valuing you when they had the chance, for squandering the precious gift of your love. The separation has served as a brutal awakening, making them acutely aware of the magnitude of what they have lost. They miss your presence, the way your very being filled their world with light and joy. They long for your love, a love that was once a constant and comforting presence in their lives. They crave the connection that once existed between you, that intimate and profound bond that transcended the ordinary. It has become painfully clear to them that the old adage is true, a truth that now resonates within the deepest chambers of their heart. We often do not realize the true value of something or someone until it is gone, until we are left with nothing but the echoes of what once was. They now know, with a certainty that leaves no room for doubt or denial, that losing you is a direct consequence of their own actions, a bitter harvest reaped from the seeds of their own neglect. They are grappling with the immense weight of that loss, a burden that threatens to crush their very spirit. They are lost in deep contemplation, endlessly reflecting on the beauty and wonder of what they once had, and how their own ego, their own pride, their own stubborn self-centeredness led them to lose it all. They see now that their behavior, their actions, were often driven by a deep-seated insecurity, a fear of vulnerability, and a misguided desire to protect their own fragile feelings, even at the expense of yours. They allowed their pride, that insidious force that builds walls instead of bridges, to stand in the way of truly connecting with you on a soul level. And as a result, they let something incredibly precious, something rare and beautiful, slip through their fingers like grains of sand. This devastating realization has left them feeling utterly ashamed, not only for the way they treated you, but for the profound weakness they displayed in allowing their own flaws, their own insecurities, to sabotage a relationship that held the potential for so much more, a relationship that could have been a source of boundless joy and fulfillment. One of the most painful aspects of this entire ordeal, a truth that haunts their waking hours and disturbs their restless sleep, is the knowledge that they made you feel jealous and insecure, when all you ever did was love them unconditionally, with a purity and devotion that knew no bounds. They see now, with a clarity that pierces their heart like a sharpened blade, how profoundly unfair it was to make you doubt yourself, to question your own worth, especially when you were giving them everything you had to offer, holding nothing back in your selfless dedication. They are consumed by a deep and abiding remorse for the hurt they caused, for the pain they inflicted upon your tender heart. They now understand, in its full and devastating gravity, the magnitude of their actions, the far-reaching consequences of their thoughtlessness. This shame is not a fleeting emotion, a momentary pang of regret. It is a constant companion, a shadow that clings to them every moment of every day. They are haunted by the memories, replaying them endlessly in their mind's eye, each one a fresh wound, a stark reminder of what they did, of how deeply they hurt you. They see your face, the flicker of hurt in your eyes, the subtle withdrawal of your spirit, and the pain becomes almost unbearable. In the depths of their heart, they know they have a long and arduous journey ahead of them if they ever hope to make things right, if they ever dare to dream of redemption. They understand that their mistakes have left deep wounds, wounds that may take a lifetime to heal, if they can be healed at all. They know that regaining your trust, if such a thing is even possible, will require an immense amount of time, unwavering effort, and a profound transformation of their very being. But what they feel most strongly now, more than anything else, is a burning desire, a fervent longing, to heal the pain they caused, to somehow, in some way, demonstrate to you that they have truly changed, that they have learned from their mistakes, and that they now value you in a way they never did before, with a depth of appreciation that knows no bounds. They miss you more than words can express, more than any poetic phrase could ever capture. Their greatest wish, the deepest desire of their heart, is to have another chance, an opportunity to show you how much they have grown, how profoundly they have been transformed by this experience, and how much they now cherish the love they once so carelessly took for granted, the love that was once the very air they breathed. They remember a time when they felt a constant pressure to be likable, to fit into a mold that was not truly their own. It was not an easy task, this relentless pursuit of acceptance, especially when there was always the unspoken expectation of measuring up to some arbitrary standard, some idealized version of themselves that seemed forever out of reach. There was a constant comparison to those who seemed effortlessly charming, those who were always well-adjusted and socially adept, gliding through life with an ease and grace that they could only envy. They often found themselves overwhelmed by the need to fit in with the perceived best, constantly striving to be someone they thought others wanted them to be, rather than embracing their own authentic self. This relentless effort to conform, to please, to be accepted, drained them both mentally and emotionally, leaving them feeling exhausted and depleted. But in the midst of this exhausting pursuit, a profound and sobering realization began to dawn. They came to understand, with a growing sense of clarity, that the only person they could truly rely on, the only constant in the ever-shifting landscape of their life, was themselves. This recognition, though initially tinged with a sense of loneliness, ultimately became a source of strength. With this newfound awareness, they made a conscious decision to shift their focus inward, to turn their attention away from the external world and towards the cultivation of their own inner being. They resolved to build a version of themselves that wouldn't need to depend on anyone else for validation or support, a self-sufficient and resilient self. This journey of self-discovery and self-improvement began with good intentions, fueled by a desire for growth and a commitment to self-care. But somewhere along the way, the path became obscured, and they veered off course, losing sight of their original purpose. They found that the demands of life were relentless, a constant barrage of pressures and expectations that left them feeling overwhelmed and vulnerable. In an attempt to find solace, to escape the relentless pressure, they turned to small pleasures, seeking refuge in momentary distractions. At first, these indulgences seemed harmless, a simple way to take a break from the constant strain, a brief respite from the harshness of reality. But what began as a temporary escape, a fleeting moment of relief, gradually transformed into a pattern, a deeply ingrained habit that began to define their way of living. The occasional indulgence, once a rare treat, became something they felt they couldn't do without, a crutch they leaned on more and more heavily. Each time they sought comfort in these distractions, the more dependent they became, until eventually, these behaviors morphed into full-blown addictions, a web of dependence that ensnared them. They found themselves caught in a vicious cycle, a self-destructive loop that they felt powerless to break. There were days when they desperately wanted to change, to break free from the habits that had taken root in their life, strangling their spirit. But the habits had become too ingrained, too much a part of their identity. They weren't just behaviors anymore, they had become woven into the very fabric of who they were. They started to feel trapped, imprisoned within the confines of their own choices, and worse, they felt utterly alone. They had put in so much effort to fit in, to be liked, to gain the approval of others. Yet, in doing so, they lost sight of who they really were, sacrificing their authenticity on the altar of acceptance. They became someone who relied on external things, on fleeting sensations, to feel a temporary and ultimately illusory sense of contentment. There was a deep and persistent emptiness within them, a void that these habits, these addictions, could never truly fill, no matter how much they indulged in them. Despite this inner knowing, this nagging sense of dissatisfaction, they found themselves clinging to these destructive patterns because they were familiar, predictable, and most importantly, they gave them a false sense of control over their own life, a sense of order in the chaos. Then, everything shifted. The landscape of their existence was irrevocably altered when you entered their life. You stood out to them in a way they didn't fully understand at first, a quiet and compelling presence that drew their attention like a moth to a flame. There was a simplicity about you, an authenticity that was both captivating and disarming. Unlike the people they were accustomed to being around, you didn't seem to be burdened by a multitude of bad habits, nor did you make unreasonable demands or engage in manipulative games. You were different from the other women they had encountered, women who seemed consumed by trivial pursuits, obsessed with superficial appearances, or constantly craving attention and validation. You seemed to exist in your own world, a world of inner richness and meaning, focused on things that held genuine significance for you. And that, in itself, fascinated them. You didn't seem to care about the opinions of others, about the fickle judgments of society. Your confidence wasn't loud or showy, a desperate attempt to prove something. It was quiet and genuine, a deep-seated self-assurance that radiated from within. That quiet strength, that inner peace, made you seem both busy and beautiful, a unique and captivating presence in a world of artifice. The more time they spent observing you, the more they realized how organic and natural you were, like a force of nature, untouched by the superficiality that dominated so many people's lives. You seemed unburdened, as if you had found a way to live above the petty concerns and fleeting temptations that kept people like them shackled to the material world. To them, you were like a breath of fresh air in a stifling room, a source of light in the darkness. Your presence made them acutely aware of how cluttered their own life had become, how they had been suffocating under the weight of their own destructive habits and the desperate need to escape from reality. Being around you, they began to see themselves more clearly, and the sight was not always pleasant. It was uncomfortable, almost painful, because you seemed to highlight everything that was wrong with the way they had been living, the self-deception they had been engaging in. They realized that they had been trying to fill a vast and aching void inside them with distractions and indulgences, mistaking temporary pleasures for lasting happiness, fleeting sensations for true and enduring contentment. Seeing how content and at peace you seemed, without any of the crutches they depended on, made them question everything about themselves, the very foundation of their existence. This realization didn't bring about an immediate change, a sudden and dramatic transformation. But it planted a seed of awareness within them, a tiny spark of hope that flickered in the darkness. You didn't do anything specific to cause this shift, this subtle but profound change in their perception. It was simply who you were, the essence of your being. You existed in stark contrast to the chaos and confusion of their own life, and that contrast, that difference, was enough to make them pause and think, to reflect on the choices they had made. It made them want to be better, to strive for something more, to be different from the person they had become, lost in the labyrinth of their own self-destructive patterns. For the first time in a long while, they felt a glimmer of hope, a faint possibility that they could break free from the self-imposed prison, the pattern of behavior that had trapped them for so long. They don't know if they will ever be able to fully change, to completely shed the skin of their old self. But meeting you, having you in their life, made them realize that there is another way to live, a way that doesn't rely on escaping from reality, but on confronting life head-on, with authenticity and self-respect, with courage and vulnerability. In a world full of facades, where people often hide behind masks and engage in unhealthy habits, you were like a mirror, reflecting a better version of what life could be, a glimpse of a more fulfilling and meaningful existence. You made them see that there might still be time to rediscover who they really are, beneath all the layers of coping mechanisms and addictions they had built around themselves, the protective armor they had worn for so long. And for that, they will always be eternally grateful.